Hi, I'm Lee and this is my podcast about my handmade life. I'm on Ravelry as louleigh and I am on Instagram as Instamatic louleigh, and I'm also a purveyor of fine knitting bags, and you can find my shop on Etsy as Shop Louleigh. So welcome to my bedroom and my witterings about knitting today. Yes, mostly knitting I think it is. I hope you're having a marvellous day and I'm so chuffed that you would come and join me for a little bit of it. Many of you have joined in the giveaway that we're having in our Ravelry group, and yes, we have a Ravelry group. Come and join if you'd like to, that would be nice. But we've got a giveaway going on at the moment for the Grello Love pattern and some yarn to make that sock pattern. And I have been really enjoying seeing all your socks and hearing about what makes them your best socks or your worst socks. And I've been loving seeing all those feet as well in different shapes and sizes. That's really interesting. It's always interesting to know what sort of construction suits what sort of shape of foot, I suppose, and what works best for people. But sometimes it's just that you really love the yarn and how the pattern worked out together, and it's been so interesting and so much fun. So even if you're not planning on entering to win the little Grello Love kit that I've put together, then just pop over and have a look. Yeah, that's been lots of fun. I've abandoned the what am I wearing segment because I've realised I'm not wearing anything of note, and actually I'm wearing the same t-shirt I was last time. I swear I wash. I just don't have a huge wardrobe, so you know, you're bound to see the same thing again sometimes. I'm not like Princess Diana or Lady Diana who's going to turn up in something different every episode. Unless I get sponsored by some fashion company or something. Highly unlikely, I think. Anyway, on with the show. You might hear hiccuping in the background because my puppy dog at lunchtime was sniffing around in the garden, and I don't know what he's sniffed up his nose, but anyway, he's just trying to work it out. And I've been trying to convince him to have a little drink because I'm sure that would solve everything. And I suspect that he's had a nibble on my rosemary plant, and maybe it's just the smell in his mouth that he's trying to get rid of. But anyway, so you'll hear noise in the background. It's my animals. After the last episode, which was only a week ago, wasn't it? Yeah, last week's episode, a few of you said that you were interested in having a go at knitting lace. I showed my Edwina shawl, and yeah, thought you were interested in either having a go at that particular shawl or just at knitting more lacy projects. And so I thought I would share some of my tips with you, and some of them are fairly common things that people do, so there's no rocket science here. They're just things that I like to do. So I have my Edwina shawl here. The pattern is by D. O'Keefe, and I am knitting it out of, oh look, there's bitty bits on there. How did they get there? You see, that's in the wild knitting. I bought some of the wilderness inside. I suspect that's Marshall coming with bitty bits on him. That's my dog, who you can still hear hiccuping in the background. Right, okay. So the yarn I'm using is from Jameson and Smith, and it is their Shetland Supreme 2-ply lace weight, 100% real Shetland wool. And it's not a really smooth yarn, it's got a little bit of a halo and a softness to it. I think it will be nice and snuggly in winter. And I am on the last chart, which when I finished the second to last chart and got on to the last chart, I got really excited because I was sort of like, oh, I'm on the home stretch. In fact, I've still got about 9,000 odd stitches left to go, so maybe I need to rein myself in a bit. But so there we go. That's the shawl as it is. Of course, it's all scrunched up on the needles because I like to use a short cable, so there's nothing much to see there. And I have, I'm knitting on the Chalgoo wooden needles. I like wooden needles for lace because all the fancy bits don't slip around so quickly. I started this on my Knit Pro Symphonies, but I really didn't like that little join just there. So I thought I would try the Chalgoo bamboos, and they are better. In fact, I like the feeling of these all together a little bit better. And I also like the Chalgoo cable. You've probably seen other podcasters talk about that. But if you're thinking about having a go at lace, I also mentioned last week the pattern stand that I'm using, which is, it's by Knit Pro, and it comes as a compendium. Mine is the smaller size. It's just sort of holds an A5 sheet of paper. I don't use this very often actually, but if you're doing anything from a chart, it's quite handy. And inside, when you open it, it's got a pocket with space for a pen. I don't keep a pen in there because it keeps falling out, but you know. So I've got all the written parts of the pattern in there, and on the other side is this magnetic part, so it must be something metal in there. And then it's got little magnets that you can hold it in place, and this is the row marker. Now these aren't cheap things. I think it was over £20, and so before this I just used to get a large post-it and I would just stick it below the row that I was working on. And what I do is, it's got this little closure thing, comes right off, and I keep it open like this. And we have the armrests on our couch are rolled, and it sits really nicely. I just sit it there and I can see exactly where I am. Yeah, so that's that. So that's that one. Like I say, you don't have to get that. I mean, you could just stick your pattern to the side of a Weet-Bix packet and put a post-it note on it, would do just as well. You know, just as a way of standing it up and keeping a track of what row you're on. So, my first tip is not really a tip at all. It's just basic common sense. However, it's not something I did for a long time. Stitch markers. Stitch markers for every repeat of the pattern. They're a bit of a faff. On this pattern they're a bit of a faff because sometimes you're having to knit two together, or even do a knit three, a 3-stitch decrease, and there's stitches on either side of the stitch marker, so you do have to manoeuvre them about a little bit. But it's still worth having them in because it just makes life so much easier. Actually, the ones I like, these ones, because they're a bit bigger to hold on to if you do have to take them off, move some stitches about and then put them back on again. Whereas some of the littler ones, you might not even be able to see that one, that little heart-shaped one, are a bit more difficult to manoeuvre, but you'll need lots of them. I've no idea how many I've got on this, but I've got about 3 different sets on here now. Yeah. Now, because I was having to manoeuvre in previous projects, because I was having to manoeuvre them round knit two togethers and things like that, I didn't bother with them. But it does make it really difficult to spot a mistake if you don't have stitch markers. And it also makes it really difficult to put your knitting down partway through a row and just leave it and then have to come back to it. Whereas if I put this partway down through a row, because I've got the stitch markers in, I can pretty much see exactly where I am on the pattern. And given that I've got about 400 stitches on the needles at the moment, you know, I'm not always going to get to the end of a row unless I have some marathon knitting session. So that's quite handy. I make lots of mistakes, and so it's just easy to spot where the mistake's been made and to tink back a bit and fix it. The common thing that I do, I'm not sure if I forget to do yarn overs or if I somehow drop the yarn over as I'm purling back. And so I've made numerous mistakes in this, and I've been able to spot them really easily and fix them. So that's tip number one. Do not neglect your stitch markers, as I have. I will learn the lesson on your behalf. If you're knitting lace for the first time, I would suggest that you use lifelines, and I use dental floss for my lifelines because it's easy to pull out. And a lifeline is just a long strand of thread or dental floss or something that you thread through all of the stitches on your needle, and you just leave it in there. I tie it off at both ends, and it means that if you have to rip back to a certain point, you know you've got all the stitches all saved on your lifeline, because picking up stitches from lace can be quite, well, I find it impossible. And so I haven't put any lifelines in this. Perhaps that's tempting fate. I hope not. Because if I start unravelling, I'm going right back to the beginning. That could be famous last words. Crumbs. Touch wood. I'm not usually superstitious, but you know. So as a beginning, the first shawls that I made, I would have put in a lifeline at least every 10 rows. Sometimes I put them in the chart where a chart changed or something like that. But take the time to put them in regularly, because if you have to go backwards, you don't want to have to go all the way to the beginning. So yes, and as I say, I prefer to do dental floss because it pulls out at the end really easily. The other thing I would say is that if you put a lifeline in and then you get to the next place where you want to put a lifeline in, so you get your lifeline in and you tie it off, don't take out the previous one, just leave it there in case you have to go back through 2 sections for some reason. I mean, you might not be as absent-minded as me and that might just sound stupid, but yes, I've had to do that as well. So yes, that would be my next tip, because as I say, it is hard to pick up stitches when you're knitting lace. So the other tip that I have is to take the time to, after you've sort of knitted the first 5 centimetres, 5 to 10 centimetres, you might just, for that first bit, you might just have to just follow the instructions blindly and go on faith that the person, you know, that you've got it right. But once you've done that, just stop and spread out your knitting and have a look at the shapes that you're making and at the different types of stitches that are making those shapes. Because if you can learn to read your knitting, it makes it so much easier to preempt what stitch is coming next. You know, do you have a little bit like this where you've got these lines that are coming outwards, and so you can kind of, oh yeah, there's an SSK on one side and there's a knit 2 together on the other side. So if you take the time to look at your knitting, then you sort of get an idea of when you're you know, if you sort of think, if I do this stitch here, that line goes in the wrong direction, that's not right. And so you can think back and just see if there's some sort of error there and fix it. And it does take a while to get used to the way the stitches should look. Well, it took a while for me to get used to the way the stitches should look. I knitted my first shawl all the way on blind faith. I just followed the instructions as they were written, and if it came out wrong, well, I still have no idea, but anyway, it looked okay. But the more you learn to sort of read what you've done and to see the shapes that you're making, the easier it is to sort of anticipate what's coming. And one of the things that I do really occasionally is I sort of colour in the chart a bit. I'm not going to hold this up close because I don't want you to be able to see all the details. But you can see down the bottom here that I haven't colour coded each different stitch type. But what I have done is with the pink markers, I've marked up all of the decreases, no matter what sort of decrease it is. And then I've taken a different colour and I've marked up all of the overs. And if you do that, it makes it really easy to see the shape that you're making at a glance. And so you can look at the photo then and kind of see where you're at with it. So there's my photo. So on this chart here, this might not work, you might not see anything. Right, I'll turn this upside down actually, it's probably the better way to do it. Because I can see the top of this little diamond here, just here, once I've coloured it in. And just by adding that colour to your chart, it makes it easier to understand the pattern and to visualise the pattern. I mean, I don't do it so much now anymore because I can just look at the black and white chart and go, oh, that's how that goes. But if you're not used to looking at all of those symbols, they can just look like a jumble of symbols, and the colour just makes it more visual and easy to read. And as I say, I'm not trying to colour code every type of decrease or increase, or a balanced 3-stitch decrease or anything like that. I'm just trying to get an idea of the shape that I'm making so I can visualize what my knitting's supposed to look like. So yeah, those are the 3 things that I thought I would share with you about knitting lace, and I hope that was helpful. I would love to hear what you think in the Ravelry group. If you've got any other tips for knitting lace for new lace knitters, that would be really interesting. So if you pop over to the episode thread for this episode, then it would be great to hear about your lace knitting tips. This is the sock segment. I've realised in that last segment I had started talking at a great rate of knots. So I have been playing in my dye pot again. I'm not sure if I've shown you this or not, but this is the colourway that I came up with. I had wanted it to be a little bit greener. It's probably a little bit greener than it actually looks there. That looks quite baby blue, but it has these wee flecks of orange in it that kind of remind me of a fish bowl. Let me just make sure that's focusing. Yeah, that kind of remind me of a fish bowl. And so I had to cast on another sock. And I have it here. I have a cozy that the lovely Nina from Give Me a Crown sent me, this lovely knitting cozy. It's very nicely made actually. She has an Etsy shop. And this is my sock so far. So this is just a BFL nylon, and the stitch pattern is one that I'm not sure if I made it up on the spur of the moment or not. I feel like I've seen this stitch pattern before. Let me make sure this is focusing because you might be able to help me. Yeah, I feel like I've seen this stitch pattern recently on a sock, and I just can't remember what pattern it was. I mean, I haven't seen the actual written pattern, but I feel like I've just seen that particular type of lace. I thought it looked sweet in this yarn, and one of my lovely knitting chums agreed with me and cajoled me into going forth boldly. So yeah, so that's my latest sock on the go. If you're on Instagram, you might have noticed that Blacker Yarns are bringing out 2 more yarns, and they have asked a number of podcasters and Instagrammers to try them out. And so they have sent me a sample to try out and talk to you about as well. I suppose I'm a little bit biased because I knit reasonably frequently with blacker yarns. I think I've knit about 3 or 4 garments using their yarns, and I really like them. So yeah, they sent me a little sample of their Cornish tin tube to try out, and this is their 11th birthday blend. I never tried Cornish tin one. I think I just felt like I had enough yarn at the time. And this is a blend which I thought was rather interesting, because one of the things I really like about blacker yarns is that they do breed specific yarns, and it's really interesting to sort of try out the fibres from, to try out the yarns from a specific breed and just see how they play. And so when they said they were doing a blend, I was kind of like, oh really, will that make it less special? I shouldn't have been so cynical, because they're very good at what they do, and I always enjoy their yarn. It's always a really nice quality. But yeah, so this is their Cornish tin, and it comes in DK and 4-ply, and they sent me 30 grams of the double knitting to play with. I should probably read you this bit off the back here that tells you what's in it. It's all British fibres, including alpaca, Portland, Saxon Merino, Gotland, Jacob, Shetland, Welsh Mountain, mohair and English Merino. Yeah, so they sent me the sample, which I have knitted into a little mitten. This pattern is Woodland Tales by Melody from Mandarins, and it's so much fun. I really enjoyed knitting it. I could only do a mini mitten. I can't actually fit my hand in there. It's far too short. And for the mitten, I knitted this up at the gauge that the pattern suggested, which was a true DK gauge. I forget exactly what it was now. Oh, I should have written that down. But it was tighter than the recommended gauge for the yarn. The recommended gauge on the ball band for this is 20 stitches over 10 centimetres. For a mitten, I would usually knit tightly, because you don't want to get wet hands when you're making a snowball. That's just wrong. And so I think this has made a lovely, a really lovely mitten actually. It's got a lovely thick close fabric, and I love this little stitch pattern on the back. I think the stitch pattern would have been clearer had I gone up a needle size and used the recommended. I knit this on 3.5mm needles, and I think if I had knitted it on 4mm needles, that the stitch pattern would have been a lot clearer. But I have to admit, I mean, purple's not really, well, I say purple's not really my thing, but look, matchy matchy. I have to admit, I would have loved to have had enough yarn to make a pair of these mittens. I think they would just be wonderful. One of the features I really like about this pattern, I'm going to shove my fist in here, look, doesn't that look weird? Is I love the way it sort of cups your wrist. Okay, so it's not going to go up into your coat and keep everything nice and warm. You could probably make that a little bit longer. So it came down to about here, but I just love the way it sits on your wrist. It's like driving gloves or something. But yeah, it was just such a fun knit. The yarn is, it's quite a round yarn. I mean, it looks okay for a lace pattern. I think it's, oh crumbs, I might be lying. I think it's a 3-ply. Let me just have a look here. Yeah, it's a 3-ply, so it's a rounder yarn that, well, when you look up people that on Instagram, people that have done swatches with cables in them, they look really good. and you can really see the texture. But I think some of the lace patterns just got a little bit lost there. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a gauge thing or just the fact that it's a rounder yarn, because you know, lace always pops out a little bit more if you have a 2-ply yarn. Yeah, it's lovely though, because of the alpaca. It has a very slight halo on it, and it's actually got a wee bit of a luster as well, just a little bit of a shine. It's not a particularly soft yarn. When I got it in the skein, my first impression was, oh, this is quite crunchy. But then when I opened it out, it did feel a lot softer, and my mitten doesn't feel like that soft because I have knitted it a bit tight. But I actually, realising that this might not be the best test of the yarn, I curtailed my mitten knitting reluctantly and got out my 4mm needles and made another swatch. I had to bind off quite tightly. I was using up every last centimetre, and I really love the fabric that this has made. It's just, it's got a little bit of drape to it. It is a woolly yarn. You know, this is the sort of thing that's going to keep you lovely and cozy in winter. This is not anything that I would want next to my skin. I might use it for a hat, but I definitely wouldn't use it for anything that's going round my neck. And if it's like other blacker yarns, I don't think I should have done the Knit British swatch along test on it. I can't imagine this would pull very easily. I should try that, shouldn't I? But I think it would be there's lots of really strong fibres in there, especially with the mohair, and so I would have thought that any garment you knit with this is actually going to keep its shape and really wear really well for a long time. Now, Blacker are talking about this as a luxury yarn, and I was just thinking about, I suppose it's a high quality yarn, and I was thinking about it in comparison to the other blacker yarns that I have used, which, as I say, they're all high quality yarns, and I think they're all special. I can't say I would run out and buy this especially over and above other blacker yarns, because they're all beautiful. It's a beautiful yarn, and your garment would last a really long time and it would look great. But I think all blacker yarns are lovely, and yeah, I wouldn't buy this one especially. That makes it sound bad, but it's not. I think that's a credit to their other yarns. I love them all, they're beautiful. But it was lovely to knit with. I really enjoyed this. It was a great knitting experience, and I really love this mitten. It's the cutest thing ever. Just trying to think if I have anything more intelligent to add to that. I feel like I've sort of run out of steam. It's a beautiful yarn. I would, if you get the opportunity to give it a squish, if you've got the funds to knit a whole jumper in it, then do it. I think what I'm trying to say is I wouldn't be worried if I missed out on this, because I know that Blacker will make other really nice yarns that I would love just as much. If they closed their doors and never produced yarn again, then I would weep and wrench my hair out. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing them. They've brought out well, they haven't brought out a new lace weight. They have a lace weight called St Kilda, and they have teamed up with the Knitting Goddess to develop some new colours, and I'm so excited about that, because they tend to have a fairly standard colour palette in their other yarns, and I think the Knitting Goddess has just really added a bit of zing to the St Kilda, so I'm really excited to see that one. Yeah, so that is the That's the Cornish Tin by Blacker Yarns, and that is my review of it. Buy all the Blacker Yarns. Now I really do sound like I'm on QVC. So, some of you may have been wondering what happened to the What Would You Like to Hear About segment, and I hadn't forgotten it. I had just had stuff to talk about. However, I have had a question about these guys, and I'm not going to tell you about them this week. I'm going to tell you about them next time I podcast, because I have had another question that has been in the What Would You Like to Hear About thread for a long time. It's quite a big question, actually. Let me read it out. It's from Daisy Knitter. I would like to hear about how you've developed as a knitter over the years. Do you do more complicated stuff now, or just more and more of the stuff you know you're good at? What's your favourite type of knitting now, and is there anything you wouldn't do anymore now that you're a better knitter? You see, that's a massive question. I could probably spend the rest of the afternoon answering that one. But anyway, thank you, Daisy Knitter. So, yeah, I had to have a good think about this one. I thought I would talk about how I started knitting. I started knitting when I was really little. I was probably about 4 or 5, and my dad cast on for me and my brother, and he showed us how to make knit stitches, and so I made knit stitches for a while and got bored and stopped. And then when I was a bit older, I was about 7 or 8, I was in my brother's room where I probably wasn't supposed to be, and I definitely wasn't supposed to touch anything. But I pilfered this book from him. And so this is, I have shown this on Instagram, and I know some of you also learned to knit from this book. So as a little kid, I took this book and I worked through it from cover to cover, and it's quite a comprehensive volume. I had some bright red wool. It wasn't acrylic. Acrylic was not a thing in our house. I mean, I was brought up on a sheep farm, and my mum was of the opinion that if you were going to spend all that time knitting anything, it should be in wool. And so she had a massive big bag of leftovers and things, and I don't remember any of it being acrylic. It was all wool. Acrylic was just not worth the trouble. Wool was better. It had all these qualities that we knew about. You know, it's fire retardant, it holds its shape, it breathes, all sorts of things. And so, yeah, I was wool right from the start. It's in my veins. So I had the needles, and I had some bright red double knitting wool, and I made a whole lot of little swatches. Some of them got bigger and some of them got smaller. I cast on and I cast off, and I worked my way through this book, and I didn't knit any, although that's not true. I made the ball out of it, and you had to make it in segments with increases and decreases, and that was where I learnt about gauge, because I used 2 different colours and my segments were different sizes, and I can actually remember crying about that. But anyway, it was a valuable lesson in gauge. You know, as an 8-year-old, you never forget. Swatching's not a bad thing. It saves a lot of tears. And I also knit some bright red booties for my cousin, and I'm not sure if they ever got worn. But anyway, I managed to knit them from the patterns in this book. The other thing that it does is it actually takes you through the sort of abbreviated language that's used in knitting as well. So by the time I came out the other side of this book, I could actually follow a pattern. And I got to the end of this book and I desperately wanted to knit a jumper. I was so enthusiastic about it, and Mum didn't think I had the attention span for it, and she was probably right, because I have the attention span of a goldfish. And so she would never buy me the yarn, which was most distressing. And so I got to the end of the book, and that ended my knitting career for a good few years. As a teenager, I might have knitted a few hats and things. And then I kind of came back to it in my 30s when I was going through a bit of a rough patch actually. And I think I did it for the same reason that I did the Edwina shawl. I could do things and feel like I'd achieved something, so it was a good de-stressor. But I think the fact that I learnt out of a book from such a young age really shaped my approach to knitting. How do I mean that? So knitting for me is more of an exercise in reading comprehension than anything else, and I run on the philosophy that if I can read the instructions, then I can do it. And I guess the other thing is, with that in mind, that if I don't understand the instructions, it's not me. The instructions are just bad. And so I would go off and find sort of auxiliary materials, other books that explained techniques. I would look things up. The internet wasn't so much a thing back there. So, you know, I would go to the library and find books that explained different things in different terminology. Yeah, and so if I could understand the instructions, I could do the thing. So all things were possible. And so I suppose I've always chosen patterns because I liked the finished thing and because I wanted the finished thing. And I was less worried about how hard it was. There are some things like socks and things, I definitely knit those as relaxation things, and I probably choose easier projects sometimes because I know it's going to be relaxing. So after I knitted my first lace shawl, I knitted about 6 easy scarves, all in the same pattern. But yeah, I never kind of look at a pattern and think, oh, that would be too hard. And the only time that's really let me down was when I first tried colour work. It was a pattern off Knitty, and I can't remember the name of it. It was for a colour work pair of socks, and I didn't know about colour management and how to manage the floats at the back and that sort of thing. So I just pulled them so tightly that the whole sock looked smocked. And I couldn't even get it on my foot. I think I got just past the heel shaping and gave it up as a bad lot. And so that did put me off colour work for a while, until I re-encountered it via my Norwegian auntie, who gave me some really useful tips. But other than that, if I've got it wrong, I've just kind of pulled it out and tried again. Or if I don't understand an instruction, I just go off and look for auxiliary material so I can sort of get it right. So I base my decision on what I want to do on the finished object and how much I want it, rather than how hard the techniques are. Yeah, how have I evolved as a knitter? I don't really know, because I suppose I haven't really, there's nothing at the beginning that, because after all those little swatches with the different techniques in them, I didn't really feel like I needed to start off on small projects. And I kind of understood the rudiments of how things were constructed. We did sewing at school, and I also sewed with Mum at home, and so I understood garment construction and the shapes and how to fit things in a really basic way. I wouldn't say I'm incredibly good at fitting, but I kind of knew how things should fit and what the different pieces should look like. And so making garments just it didn't seem inaccessible to me. It was just a matter of having the yarn and doing it, really. And then I discovered top-down construction through Stephanie Japel, and that was like a real eye-opener. I think she was called Glampire, her blog. Yeah, and so all these new construction techniques were so exciting. But I think that's sort of been my philosophy on knitting. I'm just trying to think, Daisy Knitter, about your question and if I can say anything more intelligent than that. Yeah, I think that's about all. So that brings me almost to the end. I have had a special request, so just stand by and I'll see what I can do. So, are you on my microphone? This fellow has been asleep. This is my new puppy dog, Marshall, and you can see Bobby over there. He's been sleeping on the bed. Hello, puppy, did I wake you up? Poor fellow. Oh, you're having a scratch. Here we go. Look over here. There we go. Those are the knitters. Say hello. So yes, this is our new puppy. He is called Marshall, and he is a lesser Apso. Aren't you, lovely thing? Yes, you are. Do you want to go back to sleep now? I shall put you down. So I shall say goodbye to you, and don't forget to go over and enter our giveaway for the Grello Love Kit, and I shall see you next time. Bye!